You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you so much for joining me today on this Mindset and Motivation Monday, where we are going to be chatting about making the choice to never complain again. It's literally one of the most powerful things you can implement into your life, and I want to share with you why today that is, and also give you the big 3 reasons I figured out for myself that by not complaining, how I was going to move forward in life. And so this was a dramatic change for me. Really, I grew up as, I would say, an overall just amped up kid. You know, if there was like all these diagnoses back then of ADHD and all of these things, then I would have certainly been put in that bucket. I really would have. I had a lot of intense energy as a child. My mother typically described me as an intense child. And, you know, I complained a lot. It's just kind of like the culture that I grew up in. It's a Western-based society mentality. It honestly is. And then as life progressed, you know, into my later teenage years, as you know, if you've been listening to the Cabral Concept, I got extremely sick. But not only did I get sick, doctors, the best doctors in the world in Boston, Massachusetts, couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And I went to specialist after specialist after specialist. And sure, they looked at my GI tract and they said, oh, you got this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, but I just got put on medication, okay? So sure, I had Addison's disease and myalgic encephalomyelitis and POTS and type 2 diabetes and inflammatory joint-based issues, and I had acid reflux and GERD and candida overgrowth and SIBO, all of these different diagnoses, but fine. It just gave me more to complain about. I was never getting better. And so, you know, you can look at it a couple ways. You could say, okay, this poor kid, he had plenty to complain about. Let him complain. But I'm going to tell you why that's not the answer in just one moment. And the other thing is that you can also say, okay, well, this person has it really bad. But then if you juxtapose that, it's one thing to look at. If you ever juxtapose where you're at in life, and I talked about this on a previous Mindset and Motivation Monday, no matter where you're at in life, if you have perspective, you can say, wow, it could be a lot worse. And it could have. You know, it could have. I was still able to go to college. I was still able to have a good, college life. I just had to deal with being sick all the time. That was the honest, that's the truth, is that I had bronchitis all the time and I had sinus infections all the time. I would get pneumonia. The winter time was a really rough time, but I felt a little bit better late spring and I certainly felt fine in the fall. So, you look at things and you say, wow, it could be a lot worse. And certainly that's one way to look at it. But I'll tell you, what really changed was this. This is how I began to look at it. And I want to share with you a few of these things. Is that I realized when I was complaining, there was 3 main things. The first is that in the beginning, people will tolerate it. People will listen to you when you have to complain, okay? The problem is, after a while, nobody wants to hear it anymore. They've heard it over and over and over. You have this sickness, you have this weight issue, you have this relationship difficulty, right? You feel lost in life, all of these different things. Okay, it's human to complain about maybe one specific thing, wherever it is, having a bad day. Nothing wrong with that. But it's the constant complaining, or it's the complaining about one particular issue that always seems to stay with you. That's the bigger issue that we're talking about today. And so that's number one, is that people, after a while, they just don't want to hear it. They're going to start to alienate themselves from you because you're basically bringing that negative energy to them. And believe me, this energy has real life, right? We know that. We can actually look at that now in quantum physics, and we can see that energy actually permeates your body. And we can look at it through the Heart Math Institute and a few others that it has a radius. It actually has a range. So when people say, oh, they walk into the room and the energy changes, that's a real thing. There's at least a 6-foot magnetic frequency that we know from the heart center of the body, not your heart itself, but the heart center of the body, that actually permeates those around you. It's pretty amazing. And if you think about it, well, when you're at a table of people and everybody's laughing, having a good time, there's that energy. But also, if you're at a solemn place, and maybe it's solemn for a particular reason, or if everyone's a little down or it's negative, whatever it might be, you feel that energy as well. No one needs to say anything. So when we become more aware, it's very, very interesting. That's going to be one of my topics for today, that affects others as well. So the second thing I realized is this, is that the more I complained, the more I got of that thing. And if you believe in this whole thing of the law of attraction, or I like to just say it's true science, is that your brain is fixated on it, right? So let's just use myself for example, because I don't like to talk about others. So, okay, I'm a sick kid, I get sinus infections, I'm run down. I just say, oh, here we go again. That was my philosophy. Okay, now how long is it going to take? Is it going to take 2 weeks to get better? That would be on the good side. 3 weeks? Or is it going to be a month now of me being sick? And when I focused on that, I was worried about getting the next cold. Well, lo and behold, the next cold came to me. And part of that is we do get what we attract. Now, we get what we attract by this next thing, which I'm going to be talking about in just a moment, is that my complaining kept me in the role of the victim. Now, the role of the victim is a very important thing to look at. And again, I've chatted about this before on our Monday sessions, is that when you are the victim, it becomes who you are, a part of you, your personality. Because you get sympathy. I mean, you honestly do. I got sympathy from my parents, and I got sometimes sympathy from friends and different people that I was sick. And so they say, oh, ask me how I was. And it was this little coddled, zone that I was in. And the problem is that it prevented me from moving forward. So how did I get, again, don't have to say that you believe in the law of attraction. That's totally fine. But you can also say you believe in the law of action. And that's how I want to end this podcast in a few moments. Is that by being the victim, I only took actions that victims would take. And again, in this case, I'm trying to be sensitive here, but in this case, I'm talking about myself as a sick kid. Okay, so I kept doing the things where I got sick over and over. I wasn't willing to change enough at that point in order to get a different result. Now, maybe that was subconscious and part of it was conscious. But either way, I wasn't moving forward out of that. So that was a big thing. And I've looked at that many, many times in my life. So even as I started to get better, one of the interesting things for me is that when I first started to work, I was 22 years old, out of school. I was working as a nutritionist and I was working as a personal trainer, strength coach. So I'm living in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm commuting down every day by car and then by train, and then I would walk to work. And so I lived in Providence at the time. I had just graduated from undergrad at Providence College. And by the way, great school, love that school. So what happened was this, is that I used to get into this bad mood. I'd have to wake up at, let's say, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then I would, get in my car. I would drive to the train station. I would typically not take it from Providence because I would miss the train often, and then I would be stuck for hours. But I would drive to the Red Line, which is at Canton Junction. I would drive there every day, and then that would be traffic, and I'd be sitting in traffic in the morning, and then I would eventually get on the train, and then I get my train pass, then I would get on the train, and then I would get into South Station in Boston, and then I would walk to downtown Boston from there. And so this went on every day. And this was basically let's say a 30-minute car ride, 30-minute train ride, and then a 20-minute walk to work. So it was basically an hour and a half commute each way. And it was from 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I would get the last train out 10 o'clock at night, get home, let's say around, the last train was probably that I got was like 9:15, 9:30 or so. And then I would get home around 10:30 or so. And I would do it all again every single day, Monday through Friday. And then every once in a while I'd have to work the weekend. But here's the deal. So all of that time, initially, it was fine because I enjoyed the job. It was something new, but then it just wears on you. And every day, especially the wintertime in Boston, if you live in the Northeast-based climate, or you live in a Chicago or New York or New Jersey or any of these Northeast or anywhere in the North, right? So December through April is rough weather. It's breezy, it's cold, it's raw, it's rainy, it's snowy. And I'd get to work and I'd be soaked. And then I would get home and I might be soaked and sit in the train for an hour and a half wet, and I would complain about it and I'd be upset about it. But here's the thing. It never changed anything until one day I decided to change. I got this thought, and that's why I've given this advice on a previous Mindset and Motivation Monday, and it's sometimes misconstrued, but you work your way up in levels of emotion. So back then I was more like, I should say, low mood, depressed, like woe is me, that type of thing. But I got angry, and I told you that. That's sometimes the very first step, which I see with most people in making change, is you get fed up. And so I'm walking one night to the train. It's dark out, soaked, it's raining. I can literally remember it still to this day, and I'll tell you why in just one moment. This might work for you as well. I'm walking to the train station. I have my umbrella, my umbrella with the breeze, it just flips upside down and literally it breaks the metal spokes. So my umbrella is flopping around. It's literally useless. So I just throw it in a barrel and I walk the rest of the way. It was probably about 15 more minutes of my walk, just completely soaked, drenched. And the whole time I'm just angry and upset. And then towards the last 5 minutes, something switched to my brain. And I said that this is not going to be my life. The same thing that I've shared with you before when I was about 19, 20 years old, somewhere around there as well, where one night, late at night, about 3 a.m, I had terrible, terrible insomnia until I was about maybe even 25 years old. Late at night, this could be another night where I just didn't fall asleep. I said to myself, I may never get better. I may never be able to fall asleep, but I'm no longer going to let this run my life. I'm no longer going to complain and really be the sick kid. I'm going to go on and live my life. And that's what I did from that moment on. Of course, there was slip ups, things like that, but that's what I did. And then the same thing happened around 22, 23 years old. Been doing this for a while now. I worked at the same job for about 3 years out of college. And I said to myself that night, I said, this is not going to be my life. And not only that, I actually had a smile on my face. I said, I'm going to enjoy looking back on this moment, wearing my winter hat, just soaked, chilled to the bone, have to get on a train now for the next half hour, 35 minutes, and then get in my car for the next half hour after that, still soaked, not able to get home until that time, shower, and then we'll do it again the next day. But I was literally smiling to myself, knowing I'm going to remember this moment. And I said to myself, you need to remember this. You need to remember this. It was my way of kind of getting angry, fed up, saying, this is it. It changes today. Today is the day. Or in that case, tonight is the night. And so I thought about it. I actually thought about, what am I wearing right now? This was a conscious decision. And I had just started to read books about, self-improvement when I was around 22 years old. So I was starting to get into that mindset. And I was thinking about, I was like, okay, I'm wearing my wool winter hat. I'm wearing I can think of right now, charcoal winter hat, my gray and orange winter coat. I can think about my black wind pants that I was at in the gym with, and my sneakers that I didn't have boots on that were just soaked. My feet were cold. They were soaked. And I remember to this day vividly because I said, what am I wearing right now? Where am I? I can remember walking by a parking lot saying this in Boston. It was one of those like all right parking, the park for the day. And I said, this is not going to be the case. And not only that, I'm going to remember this and think back when things are different. Now, did I have any idea how things are going to be different? Absolutely not. I had zero idea. Zero idea. All I know is that I did not want this to be my life. So I said at that moment, what's going on here? I'm complaining. But as I'm complaining, what's happening? Nothing. Absolutely nothing is changing as I complain. And not only that, I just seem to get more upset and I just get more of the same. And then, the people around me don't want to hang around with me because I'm in a bad mood. So something has to change. So I just started to look around myself and I said this, I have no choice because this is where I'm at. I'm not going to deny where I'm at. This is the job that I have. Didn't mind my job, didn't really love my commute, but couldn't afford to move into Boston. Like that just wasn't an option at that point. So I said to myself, you need to begin to change, right? Your environment is not going to change at this very moment, but you can change. And so my first step was this. I'm not going to complain about it. Instead of complaining, I'm going to channel this into making myself better. What would make myself better? Well, right now, what I need to do is I need to advance myself in my career. And so what I did was I actually started to read more. I used my time while I was in my car, instead of listening to talk radio, sports talk radio, what I did was I actually put in CDs. Back then it was CDs. And so I would listen to CDs on fitness and on nutrition and on all these things to educate myself to a greater degree. When I got on the train, I actually read the local newspaper, which was the Metro, the Boston Metro, or I would read, again, books, certifications, whatever it might be. I don't read newspapers and I don't watch the news or anything like that anymore because I don't want to I'll get into that another time, but how essentially the media is essentially sensationalism, and they have to do that because they have to get people to tune in. So the more sensational, the better. And that fills your head with those thoughts. Not ideal. Anyway, I'll talk about that at another time. But I wanted to be able to relate to my clients who are 20 plus years older than me. So I needed to figure out current events. I needed to be a little bit more worldly. And actually that helped a lot. I was able to talk about things on a much deeper level. And that's why I did that. And it actually suited me back then. So it was a conscious decision. I'm going to educate myself on kind of the world, what's going on more around me. And so I can have better conversations with people. And then what I started to do was go into more seminars. I started to make more connections. I actually sought out coaches and I would go intern with them or work with them. And then I began to model more successful people than myself. Now, successful to me means they have the career that I want. They have the management position that I wanted. They have the home that I wanted. They have, whatever it was in my life, whatever I was looking at back then. And I started to say, what are they doing right now in their life that I could potentially work my way to doing? And so that's how I looked at it. And again, for me is like, what could I control? Well, if I didn't have money, that was fine. I didn't have money back then, but I could certainly afford some CDs to listen to in my car. And I could certainly afford a $10 to $15 book that I could read. And then I could save up for a certification that might be a couple $100, okay? And then I could save up for a seminar that might be a couple $1,000. And I could do all of these things, but I knew one step in front of the other. And so for me, I wanted that good life. I really did. I realized in my early to mid 20s that I was starting to get better. I wasn't completely better yet, but I was starting to get there. And I was like, wow, if I can recover from diseases of the body that aren't supposed to be able to be recovered from, well, I can pretty much do anything. And I looked at it like that. And so that's why, honestly, I believe the same thing for you. But what I didn't have was the know-how. I didn't have the exposure. I didn't have the education, So how I looked at it is like this. Okay, I wanted the good life. A lot of us want whatever that good life is. And again, that's different for all of us. So I asked, what do I need to do? What do I need to be as a person? And what do I need to get? So remember, I have a previous podcast called the 3-step formula or the be, do, get formula. Please check that out. In order to achieve what I want to achieve, meaning like this is what I wanted. And I, to this day, it really hasn't changed. And what I want is the career that I love, where it doesn't feel like I'm working. When I do this podcast, it doesn't feel like work at all. This is something I enjoy. If I was the only one listening to this podcast, actually, I don't listen to it. I record it, right? But if let's just say my wife was the only one to listen to this podcast, then great. That would be enough because I enjoy doing it, right? So I want the career that I love. That's number one. Basically, they're all number ones, right? Then I also want to be able to feel like I can support myself in life. And for me, that doesn't mean anything fancy. I don't have a fancy car, any of those things. It means, okay, I want the home and I want to live where I want to be able to live. Like I don't want that to be a compromise. And I also always wanted a family one day. And, I didn't have a family until I got into my early 30s, mid 30s, but now I do. And so that's, to me is that's my trifecta. I mean, there's a lot of other things in life. Of course, there's my friends and there's travel that I love and all those different things, right? But like that's it. Like that's great for me. Yours might be different. I mean, it might be very different, right? Because we're different people. But at the core, we all have these same human-based things. And so how I look at it is this, is that the problem is with complaining and with all of these things is that you're always standing still, right? So when I was complaining about being sick, I was just getting more of the same. Not only that, I was getting worse because the high levels of complaining cause higher levels of cortisol or higher levels of stress, which further suppress my immune system, which means I actually got more sick. So there's truth to that. There honestly is. And when I was complaining about my work and my commute and all the terrible, the conditions that I was in, well, I was forgetting a couple things. One is that complaining again, not going to change at all. Second, nobody really cares. The third, me as a victim, well, here's the deal. Someone else would have killed to be in my position. That's another way to look at it, meaning like when I was that sick, well, a lot of other people are much more sick than I was. And they would have loved to be in that position because they weren't worse than I was, right? And when I'm complaining about my 90-minute commute in the car, then the train, and then the walk to work and the winter and all those different things. Well, here's the deal. A lot of people don't have a job that they love and they don't have work at all and they're out of work. So that's one more reason not to complain. But the other bigger reason is this, and because we have to look at ourselves as an individual, is that you are honestly in quicksand at that time when you're complaining. You're not moving forward. You're missing out on life. And life is so short as it is, you can't waste another week, another month, and certainly not another year because you can accomplish so much in the next 12 months. It's funny because as that kid who was wearing that winter coat soaked to the bone, within 2.5 years, I had moved to Boston. I had bought a condo. My wife and I were soon going to be engaged. So much had changed. So much had changed. I had actually developed the very first sports conditioning program at the gym that I was at. So much had changed. I had increased my income to be able to move into the city by increasing my certifications because I was one of the first people there with the specific National Strength and Conditioning Association, a CSCS certification. I got a specific golf-based certification. I got a yoga certification that I was actually implementing with sports-based strength training. So this is 15 years ago. So this is, for back then, combining yoga with sports was new, right? So I was doing things that were more unique. I was advancing my education by advancing my study. I was putting one step in front of the other. I was making the conscious decision that I didn't love where I was in life, but at the same time, I wasn't complaining about it. Because what I realized that by complaining, I actually realized what I didn't want. So all I did was flip-flop it. Every time I would go to complain, I said, what am I really complaining about, right? What am I really complaining about? Because I know complaining is going to get me nowhere. So what am I complaining about? Okay, I'm going to complain about my commute. So what do I want to flip-flop it. So say, what do I really want? Well, I want to work closer to my work. Okay, great. So now how are we going to work closer to your work? Well, you need to be able to afford that place. Okay, how are you going to be able to afford that place? You need to make more money at your job. Okay, how am I going to make more money at my job? I need to become the very best at what I do. That was what I said to myself. And that was my mission. And I knew that wasn't going to happen next week, next month, whatever. But as I started to study, as I put all of my time into listening to those CDs and the books, here's what changed. I actually loved it. The commute wasn't that bad because I would wear headphones when I was walking, listening to whatever. And I was educating myself and I realized I was growing. I focused more on my dreams rather than on what I didn't have. And that allowed me to move forward. And now this very day, I actually have 2 locations in Boston. One of them is literally a 3-minute walk from my home, and the other is 15-minute walk from my home. And both of them are in Boston. One's in the south end of Boston. One's in the back bay of Boston. I have the exact location where I want to live in Boston. I have the family that I want. I have 2 beautiful girls, who I adore. I have the exact career that I want. All of this was just one foot in front of the other. Now, to this day, do things come up where I have the ability to complain? Absolutely. And do I sometimes complain? Absolutely. But it has to stop within a couple minutes of complaining and just say, that's it, okay? Got it out of my system. I'm done. Again, nobody wants to hear it. Me complaining is only going to bring me more of what I don't want. And the other thing is I'm playing the role of the victim, which I don't want to be, because I realize that I'm not a victim, that I'm in control of my life, that what happened in the past is not good. And again, I want to be sensitive here because I know a lot of people, they grew up in households or situations or cultures or specific places that were very difficult. And I agree with that. And I understand that. And I'm sensitive to that. But as an adult, I need you now, and I know it's not easier said than done, and I agree with you. But what I need you to understand is that as an adult, you are able to take control of your life. You might not be in the relationship you want. You might not have the spiritual practice that you want. You might not have the health you want, the body you want, or the finances you want. But you can achieve those things. You can achieve them. And I'm not saying, again, that it's going to happen tomorrow or next month or even within this year. But here's the deal. I can guarantee you that they will never come true if you continue to stay where you are today. If you can continue to complain about your current circumstances, I can almost guarantee you're only going to get more of the same. Because that's what I see every single day in the world and in my practice is those people who are looking to change. Those people who say they want to change, but they play that role of the victim, that they concentrate on what they don't have, those people stay pretty much the same. So what I need you to look at is this. I need you to look at that it is all possible, that you can achieve the exact life that you do want, that it will take a little bit of time, but here's the thing. The time's going to pass either way, right? You might as well begin to start moving forward. So start to visualize what it is that you want in life. Try to pick one category first, right? The relationship, the career, the whatever it is. You can work on all of them, but try to get laser focused on one. And as you do that, you will start to see yourself growing. As you do that, you'll start to get motivated. That motivation will lead to even more action. And that action will then lead to greater results. If you do this, you will be absolutely amazed at what you can accomplish over the next 12 months. Trust me, you have literally nothing to lose by trying this out for yourself and everything to gain. I can't wait to hear your success stories soon. I do hope you write in. I love hearing these success stories. Thank you so much for tuning into another Mindset and Motivation Monday. And as always, if this show could help anyone, please do feel free to pass it along to them. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.